What's up, guys? So today's the 2nd of March, Friday, 2018, and there's a couple of different array of topics that I will eventually collaborate into published works that I'm still scatterbrained and working on. Problem is that I don't want to just narrow it down to a specific subfaction or topic focal of astropsychology or astrology in general. And I also want to talk about things that are relevant and potentially informative and therapeutic and important to discuss in the current times. In past sociological or transit events, there was Saturn in Sagittarius squaring Neptune in Pisces. Obviously, Saturn's no longer in Sagittarius, but we still have Neptune in Pisces. And the generational kind of lingering influences are more prominent and residual and set themes as opposed to them being actual event triggers. So this is something that will be an ongoing thing that will be exacerbated with other certain transit stressful hard aspects, or even enabling aspects with Neptune and Jupiter that will exacerbate people's abnormal psychology and mentality and behavior. So I have numerous books that I'm referencing, specific context for footnotes for some of the actual portion of the book that I'm going to be touching base on. So I'm just going to actually read off some of the footnotes or the exact quotes and some of my own kind of automatic writing, just scribbles in direct relations to the sociological dissonance, compulsive dissonance caused by the mainstream media and the media outlets in general with the Saturn-Neptune square. Saturn obviously represents the collective, the public persona, the governments, the institutions, the media outlets, and the narrative in general. And obviously when it's squaring Neptune, we're having some hard aspect to Neptune. Squaring is probably as hard as it gets, unless it were in a T-square, which is just a tension, would cause some sort of disillusionment or fantasy or lack of reality. And just with the other transit factors that were going on at the time, and just from anybody who's still, trying to, I guess, maybe censor themselves from any of the conditioning that's going on with the media, and being aware. Maybe I'm just overestimating people's capacity to be aware of this because of my intense focus in psychology, but the blatant causing cognitive dissonance, which then causes mental distresses and then causes actual, manifesting mental dysfunctions, abnormality, and behaviors and psychology problems, mental problems. And some of them can manifest as emotional depending on the temperament and the behavior profile of each individual. So one of the books that I referenced was Being Logical, A Guide to Good Thinking. And the quote is, "An idea is the subjective evocation of an objective fact. It is wrong to suppose that because we know things in the world only through ideas, it is only our ideas which we really know. AKA your perceptions and textbook knowledge is not the same or as valuable as genuine experience. Our ideas are the means, not the ends of our knowledge. The most efficient way to clarify our ideas is to look through them to objects they represent, correlating ideas with actual objective sources, origins, and facts. Be mindful of the origin of ideas. Our ideas owe their existence ultimately to things outside and independent of our mind, which I've referred to as objective facts. The focus must always be on the origin or the source of our ideas in the objective world. The more we focus on our ideas in a way that systematically ignores their objective origins, knowing your history, knowing where you're getting your sources from, aka like what I'm reading off right now, the more unrealistic those ideas become. Then, in my own words of it, bonds that bind subjective and objective orders are strained and severed and causing cognitive distress. When speaking to establish a fact, we do not refer to an idea in our mind, but an objective external validation. To establish a fact, we must look beyond ourselves and our point of views, ideas, to their sources in an objective world. Matching ideas to facts, 3 basic components to human knowledge. Number 1, objective fact. For example, a cat. Number 2, idea of a cat. Number 3, word and language or symbolism that translates to cat. The concept, idea, all starts with a cat. Without cats, real cats, the concept would not exist, aka ideas, subjective realities, are clear, concise, to the level that they are accurately reflected on objective realities. Complex ideas have more than one originating source for this kind of idea in an objective world. To prevent an idea from perpetuating pure subjectivism, it must continuously reference objective facts from which the idea derived. The further an idea or concept is separate from its objective origin, the more unclear, unsound an idea becomes. Bad ideas can be informative, not about the objective world, but about the subjective state of said persons who perpetuate said ideas in distorted concepts, aka projection. And that's even more so. In recent times, like within the last year or so, definitely, I don't even listen to or analyze the exact content of what people say. I just listen to the really brief, incomplete sentences and rambling of what they keep repeating, and it's just demonstrating what is wrong with them internally. And I just turn it right back on them and say, wow, you have a huge inferiority complex, and they go psychotic? Yeah. Yeah. You can read people not even more like a book at this point. It's so blatantly obvious, it's painful for me sometimes. So projection, bad ideas don't just happen. We're responsible for terrible ideas. It's the result of complacency, carelessness, and lack of sufficient effort, or worse, self-deception, and even willful, meticulous intent to perpetuate delusions and willful rejection of objective facts. Matching words with ideas, regardless of an idea's complexity and multitude of objective origins. General rule to guarantee depiction of an idea with accurate lingo or language, referencing or correlating said concept directly from its objective origin, is the principle to attributing language to concepts. Effective communication, complete sentences, no Twitter talk. Twitter is another form of social media that just perpetuates fragmented sentences, interpretation of ideas, etc., and acronyms, and like text talk and stuff like that just exacerbates the issue worse. Avoid presumptions that a general audience is aware of the context of ideas of which you speak. Do not treat evaluative statements, opinions, or perspective as fact. That's a major problem that's going on now as well. Avoiding vague or ambiguous language. Vague in Latin translates to wandering. Ambiguous in Latin translates to wander about. All vague language and terms share a defect of not having fixed, unmistakable meaning. Avoiding evasive language, aka being politically correct or encouraging microaggression, safe space sort of talk things. And truth specifically is obviously important in being objective. Accuracy has 2 basic forms, and truth has 2 basic forms. Ontological legitimacy of the real existence or some sort of acknowledgement of an actual thing existing. Regardless if you know a cat is named a cat, it's still obviously some sort of creature that's existing and breathing. And logical is a statement derived from facts. Lying is falsifying logical truth, is more psychological, a psychological problem, not a logical cognitive one. A conscious decision to lie and deliberately contradict your own knowledge. Psychological is associated to Pluto, and it coincides with the ancient ruler Mars, which has to do with motives, which would insinuate that lying, being a psychological problem, is premeditated vagueness or confusion or interference of a translation to an audience. That goes back and ties in with the whole Saturn square Neptune and there being a meticulous, a strategic agenda to confuse the collective society and mainstream masses. And then another book I referenced, which was published in 2005 and 2006, and I find this alarming because the statistics, again, seem to be, I think, regurgitated things that were observations or statistics done decades before that, primarily even because that particular doctor with a PhD in psychiatry and special abnormal disorder studies specifically went and researched all the astrological correlations with people that have psychopathy or serial killers charts. And I looked over that and I studied serial killers charts as well as myself being diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder almost 10 years ago. And the way that I've actually conditioned myself in general with neuroplasticity, I actually have sort of created a compulsive, or at least like it's not like a natural empathetic an emotional response, but I've conditioned to be like, this is how I should respond, this is how a normal, healthy, emotional person responds, sort of thing. And so if you can condition something like that, you can definitely condition someone to develop psychopathy as well. So The Psychopath is the Emotion and the Brain is the title of the book. I like the actual textbook references per se, but the statistics are all freaking wrong. I know that from personal experience. And the whole argument that it's mostly hereditary and partially maybe environmental, but there's no concrete evidence that it's environmental. Oh yeah, well, hereditary, I'm well aware because I have family members that have had, I have a line of family history of mental abnormalities or, dysfunctions. And even my uncle was, I don't know if he was ever diagnosed with psychopathy, but he should have been. Like, yeah, he was freaking nuts. He was scary. But the environmental factors are definitely important as well, because I potentially had the same kind of temperament and, volatile reactions as my uncle, but due to the really destructive environment that he was raised in comparison to mine, he went to prison multiple times for doing really horrible things to people, and I did not. And that's emphasizing on something. And me having the same astrological patterns and signatures with planets lining up in my birth chart to Ted Bundy, I'm definitely nowhere near Ted Bundy level. And that just demonstrates again that it's environmental factors, looking at Ted Bundy's history and knowing like his early childhood development, and then even comparing side by side to like my uncle as well. They both have common denominators of having really destructive, toxic, upbringings and stuff, as opposed to myself. So, psychopathy is caused by an impairment of forms of emotional, learning, development, or impairment, which could be damage or deterioration of neuroplasticity of the cortexes responsible for emotional intelligence, responses, and empathy. Neurological to psychological, abnormal activity with neurotransmitters, resulting in distorted points of view of reality, inappropriate behavior patterns, and inappropriate emotional response and triggers. It's actually in my own words. I know psychopathy very, very graphically, so it wasn't even like a footnoting, like citing word for word and writing it down. I kind of was correcting the book as I was going through it. So, let's see. Comorbidity, which is the conjunction of other mental or emotional abnormalities. Many disorders overlap with the context of characteristics listed above. Distorted would be in the schizophrenic or paranoid spectrum, and then Asperger's or schizoid or schiziotypal would be associated with inappropriate behavior. And then depression or bipolar or borderline could be attributed to emotional responses or triggers or inappropriate emotional reactions. Previous speculations insinuate partial biological and environmental origins of psychopathy. Astropsychoanalysis of serial killers or clinical diagnosed psychopaths reveal environmental trauma signatures being evident along with planet configurations that are deemed pre-existing potentials for dysfunctional and abnormal cognitive, psychological processes. Individuals who also share these potential astral patterns develop, grow, and lead healthy, typical lives with the full development of emotional processes and cognition, demonstrating that yes, biological factors in most cases must be present, but not all individuals with the right hereditary influences are guaranteed to develop psychopathy or empathic impairments. Note that subliminal conditioning, exposure to psychopathic violent point of views, content, or themes isolated to similar environmental factors can create new, different neurological connections, thereby activating different portions of the brain overall. This is collaborating my extensive behavioral psychology knowledge as well as the brain changing itself with neuroplasticity and cognitive conditioning. Also, neglecting emotional responses by antisocial behavior, social isolation, can cause severe desensitizing of empathic capacities and emotional intelligence. As a result, dissolving the healthy emotions and perceptives of a person, aka systematically conditioning an individual to develop psychopathic behavior. This sort of abnormal development would likely be conjunct with an underlying psychological abnormality, synthetic compounds and drug substances being the culprit, number one, and number two, schizophrenia or severe delusions on the paranoid or anxiety spectrum. Mental distress and abnormalities can manifest as a symptom or a result, aka a response to severe abnormal destructive conditioning through environmental factors, either subliminal or direct conditioning. Think of like the Saw movies. I'm not saying that those are realistic contexts, but the fear factor, more or less, and getting somebody who would never be able to even, that would faint at the sight of blood, have to cut open somebody's stomach to get a key out to survive. Those sorts of things. Depending on the individual's temperament, pre-existing abnormalities, cognitive deficiencies, and coping tactics, natural responses and survival responses could reveal potential behavior patterns that result as a response to mental distress. For example, fight versus flight. Compulsive cognitive conditioning is a real problem that health professionals, psychiatry, social science academics, experts, and collective mainstream public refuses to acknowledge, at least in the present day of 2018. Experts throughout the 70s and into the 80s, mainly into the 80s when Pluto was in Scorpio, emphasized on the negative and abusive repercussions of subliminal learning through mass media, but the warnings were quickly suppressed under the motive of power to manipulate masses flawlessly, leading to subliminal programming many generations to come to execute whatever context of the audience is conditioned to embody. Welcome to millennial psychosis, unfathomable acts of violence, illogical self-collective destructive behavior, and a complete absence of meaning, genuine intention, or rational thought to their hazardous behavior, destructive actions, and a lack of comprehension or understanding of what they've done or what they're doing. Essentially, media outlets, radio, advertising, broadcasting, music, cinematography, movies, social media are creating entire generations of high-functioning autistic psychopaths fueled by self-medicated substances or toxic prescription equivalents. When all of these influences collaborate and mold sociological norms, you get kids eating detergents, massacres without reason, dysfunctional zombie adult children incapable of fending for themselves. Welcome to today's society. Yeah. That's also why it takes me a while to write my book. Because I start to get angry or worked up about some of the context of things I see. Because I just know that they're fucking outright lies. And the subliminal learning book that I have, it's actually a really amazing reference. It's written by Eldon Taylor, PhD, and it was Subliminal Learning and an Eclectic Approach. And it was published in 1988, October 1988, and this book is amazing and also pisses me off tremendously. And it just goes back to how much I'm really pissed about, governments and corruption in general. How the way that they were basically subduing the mainstream paranoia of subliminal messaging and manipulation being used in advertising was that they quote-unquote made a law against it on the books, which actually never happened. That was all a fabricated cover-up to make people stop freaking out about it. I'm just like, dude, are you freaking serious? Yeah. The end. Alright, just kidding. So, not the end. As a matter of fact, I decided to take it upon myself to actually reference a couple of the highlighted sections of this book. So the subliminal learning, the eclectic approach, says small minds condemn what they do not understand. Richard Sefner. It doesn't work, but is it dangerous? To say that subliminal communication is controversial is a gross understatement. A telephone survey published in the Journal of Advertising in 1983 revealed that 209 subjects, 81%, had some knowledge of the subliminal advertising. By a margin of 2 to 1, subjects believed the usage of both was both harmful and unethical. Two other conclusions may be drawn from the responses of the subjects. Saying they, consumers, are being exploited in the same way a con man exploits a widow out of $3,000 of nest egg for a pie in the sky. Subliminal training. Subliminal training techniques go back to at least what Ohio State University termed minimal perception. The technique was developed in the Second World War to train United States Navy gunners. Researchers flashed silhouettes of enemy aircrafts on the screen for gunners to identify. At exposures of a 1/100th of a second, gunners were trained to identify more than 2,000 silhouettes at one sitting without a mistake. That just highlights the potential astounding influences of subliminal suggestion. The most complicated achievements of thought are possible without the assistance of consciousness. Sigmund Freud. The human can and does effectively sense, perceive, and act on undetected stimuli. It has long been recognized that patterns of perception such as those formalized under the general heading of parapsychology, the overall information processing model of a human condition, the fact that the human is extremely sensitive to a variety of stimuli that can go consciously unrecognized. The brain does not respond to information that the mind is obvious to. The capacity of the brain to process information does not require or even necessarily include conscious attention or representation. More than sufficient research supports that the plain fact that whether it is learning, memory, perception, attention, or emotion, the processes can do and occur without conscious involvement. Remember that perception in this instance refers to a process of stimuli acknowledged or registered at some level below the threshold of awareness of consciousness. I'm just reading some highlighted parts I have in here. Sorry. Limited awareness. Subjective awareness is a function of consciousness. That's restriction gives rise to possible establishing priorities. Number one, we process much more information than of which we are aware. Number two, the capacity to process information far exceeds the discernment ability. Number three, at some point, unaware information becomes available to awareness. And number four, unaware or subliminal information can be and is processed unconsciously and made to have profound effects on learning systems and on emotional and physical health. Consciousness or awareness have been suspended, and yet perception of stimuli occurs. Subliminal sensory perception is perceived at many sensory levels as subaudible frequencies. The popular history of subliminal communication is really a history of modern subliminal manipulation. Vance Packard's Hidden Persuaders. Persuasion through the art of science and motivational analysis. Psychological manipulation means to enslave the mind and to do it so suppressedly. One of Freud's most important contributions to approaching the enigma known as the human condition is the stark revelation that mankind is merely a particle of his potential. Unconscious processes predetermine conscious choices, therefore behavior aggregates of attitude and behavior constitute personality. Personality is rather rigid, and consequently the human condition is abysmal shadow of itself. Categorization of the subliminal stimuli divided descriptive values into 5 criteria: awareness and unawareness. The stimuli is 1. Below the level of registration. 2. Above the level of registration but below the level of detection. 3. Above the level of detection but below the level of stimulus discrimination. Number 4. Above the level of detection and discrimination but below the level of identification. Number 5. Below the level of identification only because of the defensive reaction. A common misconception regarding subliminal communications is that there are laws protecting the public of their use, which there's not. Perceptual defense mechanisms are what we expect to see and what we do see. Denial. Often the denial occurs through projection, that is, projected blame or fault on another. Fantasy formation creates the perceived reality or fantasy. Introjection is an interjection places blame on oneself. This self-directed blame or punishment defends against disappointments or disillusionment from other people. Isolation, avoiding connecting associations or related ideas that produce anxiety, safe spaces and all that stuff. Projection, a mechanism that allows one to project blame, fantasy, or so upon another. Regression, common during serious illness. Sublimation, redirection of basic drives simply to the substitution of accepting behavior to satisfy basic motives by some form of social behavior. Basic motives may be satisfied in a manner acceptable to the individual or society. That's, definitely evident with that. So, just some astrosociological themes to highlight that I've talked about before. The Neptune-Saturn square that was peaking in 2015, there was a mass psychosomatic conditioning going on. I'd like to note from personal experience, in 2012 to 2014, news broadcasts were objective, generally, and also broadcasts were not free. I remember going back and forth between cable providers and going through all this hassle, primarily because I only wanted to be able to watch the news, and I couldn't find any way to watch it for free. Until 2015 happened, until the Saturn-Neptune square started. Nothing in life is free. There always will be a catch, a trick, or a motive. Saturn and Sagittarius squared Neptune and Pisces. Suddenly, news reports were not only free, but displayed as priority on social media. Why? Classic conditioning, subliminal advertising, environmental influences, changing point of views of the brain, and neurological function are the overall themes of some of the problems that I'm going to be emphasizing on in my actual context of my book. So now I'm referencing another book that's called Minds, Brains, and Learning, Understanding the Psychological and Educational Relevance of Neuroscientific Research. So I'm just reading a couple highlighted parts here. So a brain is never really finished changing in absolute sense because there is a constant shifting of a symbiotic context with experience. See later in this chapter, the chapter 3, in addition, the brain often shrinks in size for inactive, undernourished individuals who live beyond the age of 80. In a way, a foregoing discussion of the brain development could be transformed into a checklist for determining the state of the development in the child's brain. Factors affecting brain development. In the previous two sections, the focus was described on general characteristics of mature brains, as well as the processes that produce general characteristics. Such an approach reveals how all brains are similar at a basic level. In present section, the primary goal is to elucidate the factors that produce individual differences in brain structures, i.e. how all brains are different. Such 5 factors will be described in turn. Number 1 is genetics. Number 2 is environmental stimulation. Number 3 is nutrition. Number 4 is steroids. And number 4 is teratogenogens. And then the other section I'd like to emphasize too, any knowledge that can be made available to the consciousness, and that is verbally described, called explicit knowledge, because the explicit knowledge is available to the conscious. People are aware of any changes that happen to it. Unconscious knowledge that can be articulated is called implicit knowledge. Cues are things in the environment or items of rehearsal system that are connected to records. So that's emphasizing on what happens when the conscious conditioning becomes conscious, or the things that are unaware to the individual become relevant. And that's actually how they conditioned the World War II naval vets, and that's how they continue to condition people to do all kinds of horrible atrocities in current time. You notice that the more and more there's actually shootings broadcasted, like the actual, it's plastered and it's like repeated, the more and more that there seems to be attention projected onto a massacre of some kind, and the actual publicity and basically airtime that the perpetrator gets, that there are actually kids out there that are basically emotionally inept and high-functioning autistic levels of that sorts of thing, psychopaths, that actually not only do it because they feel some sort of hostility against whomever's around them, regardless if that's, introspective or projected outward. And even some of them do it in certain ways just to get the glory and the fame, even if it means they're dead at the end of it all. And again, conditioning and continuing to see horrific things and graphic things all over the news, and conditioning the same narrative to say, you should hate this guy, you should hate this, you should hate that, or you should go, set trash cans on fire and blah, 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 and start riots. Like, when you continue to give persuasive conditioning on a regular basis, the neuroplasticity and just overall the environmental stimuli, regardless if it's direct conscious persuasion or if it's subliminal in some way, shape, or form, just somebody subtly projecting some sort of bias or having some sort of body language or emotional reactions to certain things, that can also stimulate people to conform to certain biases and perspectives and opinions and beliefs. And there is a correlation with why news is free now. There is a correlation with why it's easier to see it more than ever. And there is a correlation with people even saying in recent years, especially people that are older generations, how the news makes them depressed and they hate watching it and blah, 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 and it makes them anxious. Yeah, it's not good. And it's being done on purpose. And everybody needs to wake up and acknowledge that. The end.